Hey, this is Matthew, and welcome back to Nerd News Today. On this episode, I'm taking a look at the debut figures from the breakout Zack Snyder franchise, Rebel Moon. Made by Diamond Select, these are the first action figures created for this sci fi film series, with the promise of more on the way if fans are behind it. Even if you don't know much about Rebel Moon, there's some interesting figures to look at, and I'm excited to show them to you today. But before we dive into them out of the box, let's take a look at them inside the box. These 110 scale figures are packed the way most Diamond Select figures are nowadays, in very compact rectangular boxes and large windows on the front and sides to allow you to see every nook and cranny of these items. The design of the packaging itself is usually pretty standard for a Diamond figure, but the aesthetics of the box art are unique to Rebel Moon, harkening back to the poster art for the movie. However, outside of the name of the character and an image of them on the back, the boxes are essentially identical to one another. There's no individualized bio for each character either, it just tells you a paragraph about what the story of Rebel Moon is, as well as letting you know who sculpted them. Mint on card collectors might not be the most thrilled about this design, but I will say that the boxes are very collector friendly if you wanted to take them out and put them back in at a later date. And here's our Rebel Moon Series 1 figures out of the box, starring Jimmy the Robot and Nemesis. Without knowing a ton about Rebel Moon, I have to admit the designs are very cool and different than what I was expecting. This feels like it's meant to be some real high sci fi stuff here, and it's pulling inspiration from many different places. Jimmy and Nemesis remind me of parts from Seven Samurai, the original Star Wars movies, and things in that kind of vein, but with a modern design sense and some grit that you'd see in sci fi from now. They're very visually fascinating to look at, and I'm now more curious than ever to really check out what Rebel Moon is all about. Now, first, let's dive into the likenesses, and for Jimmy, that's an easy one. He's mechanical through and through, which means there isn't really much to worry about here. But Nemesis, however, is based on Duna Bay, and this is a pretty solid rendition of her face. She has very expressive eyebrows in Rebel Moon, while also being a fairly stoic kind of character. But you get all that info here through this face filled with a lot of intensity and mystery. So, really great job on both characters. Even if you're totally new to this franchise, don't know what you're looking at, a lot of that character comes through their appearance here, and that's great to see. And likewise, I can say the same for their outfits and the details in those. Diamond is usually excellent at creating both realistic clothing and robotic looks on figures and statues, so there's nothing to be concerned about in this department. The paint job is clean across the board with very screen accurate colors and appearances. Nemesis is predominantly a very dark motif here, with a crimson red on really the top half of her, followed by just a lot of black representing the Hakama and on her sleeves, and a little bit of silver for her arms. So it's a very dark looking figure here, and I kind of like the way that the top of the outfit looks as well. It's a lot of like traditional look juxtaposed next to something very uber modern and sci-fi and techy. And that sort of juxtaposition between the modern and the old really does make for a very visually interesting thing to look at. It's combining a lot of different elements once again, and that's hats off to the designers of Rebel Moon itself. But again, Diamond did a wonderful job here making sure all of those important details are represented accurately here. Jimmy is more of a silver and kind of green look, which is also pretty interesting too for a robot. I really like the way this looks. There's almost some like almost 1950s aesthetic here. We're talking again classic sci-fi elements, and to me, this kind of reads in that same way. Like there's a little bit of C3PO, maybe there's a little bit of like Forbidden Planet, but this sort of humanoid looking robot that's also very not humanoid. And that's what kind of helps it separate itself from the other actual human beings compared to this extremely mechanical looking unit here. Lots of cool detail in here, almost looking from a long lost age many, many decades ago. Lots of cool elements here, great amount of detail, and tons of things that make it look like it's rusty, beat up, and seen a lot of action. I also really like the back of the robot here. I know it's a weird thing to say, but he's got this really cool venting system, and it also kind of lets you see a little bit more of how the mechanics of this character really kind of work and function. Since this is a robotic character, after all, he's more cybernetic. There are a lot more things you can do with this, and you can actually expose the joints of this toy. So, as opposed to another human being character, that can be a little bit more off putting. But with a robot, you can have those joints exposed. You can really show those things off, and it fits perfectly and also just makes it look way cooler. So, head to toe, every inch of this figure is just packed with a lot of details. And I really like both these guys a lot. But to me, Jimmy is definitely a favorite between the two of them. So let's talk articulation, and let's start here with Jimmy because he is clearly the most unhindered of the two when it comes to being able to have some mobility. And the nice thing about this figure is that, yeah, he's got a lot of pretty visible joints that should make it very easy to figure out how to move him around. So we do have a ball-jointed head, and I think the one thing you're going to probably notice right away is how stiff this guy is out of the box. He's very stiff in some places, less than others. And I will tell you guys, that is the thing that Diamond does a lot. That's the thing that happens a lot with Diamond figures. So if you're having the same problem that I'm having right now, just go ahead and hit it with the hairdryer, and that should loosen up everything. The shoulders are ball jointed. And again, one is moving better than the other just because, like I mentioned, it's very stiff out the box, but he is ball jointed. He's just very, very stiff at the moment, but you can get some good range of motion with that. The elbows are actually double jointed. I was surprising that, but you can actually bend them pretty far back and get them into some interesting poses. So check that out right there. I mean, you've got Jimmy doing the Macarena, maybe, kind of, sort of. Don't know, but yeah, you actually can get some good range of motion with that, and likewise too, you do have some flex and some bending with these parts here. The wrists can also rotate. There we go. Boy, he is a stiff one. And they can also bend and flex, so you've got typical range of motion with all Diamond figures here in this guy. The waist actually turns, so a lot of like the Marvel Select figures don't necessarily have that. This one has a chest that moves because there's a separate chest piece here you can see, but in addition to that, his waist also turns, so that's actually really good for a Diamond figure. And as far as the legs are concerned, this is usually a part that Diamond excels at, and yeah, I mean, you've got Jimmy doing a full split. This is complete split action right here, or a very, very high kick, depending what you want to do with him. But yeah, you've got great range of motion, very squeaky range of motion with that. We do have a very nice knee joint there to get you some good range of bending there. And let's see, it looks like you can get a little bit of swivel, but not like a true thigh joint. And the feet do have a little bit of motion too. Not a ton, but just enough. So that's pretty good. That's actually, I think, better than I was expecting with our Jimmy figure. So that's some good articulation with him. But when it comes to Nemesis over here, we kind of lose a lot of the articulation because of her outfit. And you guys can see, I mean, there's not a ton of space to move around joints. And we've seen this before with other lines, like especially the Lord of the Rings line, where there's a lot of robes and things in the way. That means you're not going to have the motion and mobility that you would like. So let's see what we do have, though. And it looks like, at the very least, we should be able to move her head, right? Well, again, she's also very stiff. That should move, though. It's just really stiff. Her shoulders aren't bad, actually. Despite having this like giant kind of shoulder pad looking thing here, there's actually some pretty good mobility right there. You guys can see a double jointed elbow right there, and that works just fine. I do love having a good double jointed elbow because it lets you have much better posing with these types of characters. Just again, the downside, no butterfly joints with any Diamond figures, so not going to be able to like really cross her arms or anything like that, but at least you've got the double jointed elbows to get some more posing. And looks like these wrists do rotate. I think her other hands that she comes with as far as her accessories do allow you to bend and flex. She has another pair of hands we'll get into in a moment. Now the waist, that's about it. You might be able to go a little bit more if you, again, hit it with the hairdryer, but, it doesn't move the same as Jimmy, but there is some mobility there. It does have a little bit of a rocker to it, which is nice, but very subtle. And as far as the legs go, it's kind of hidden under this, and she does have a pair of nice legs with double jointed knees, but you got this stuff here to contend with. Now, the nice thing about these, like, I guess maybe we'll call them hakamas, is that there is this, like, section here to give you a little bit of mobility, like, to the side. So it's not completely hindered, but it is pretty darn hindered. Actually, all right, you do have a slit in the back also. So there is some wiggle room, but it's not going to be a lot. It's not the most generous. So, while she does have the same articulation as Jimmy, getting her to use a lot of those joints is going to be much more challenging. Now let's talk accessories, and unfortunately Jimmy has none, so we can go ahead and, I guess, say bye-bye to Jimmy for this little part here, but let's focus on Nemesis because she has a ton to make up what he lacks. And as I already mentioned, she comes with a pair of hands, which you can see right here. This is just a pair of open hands, but they have excellent detail, really great sculpting. I love the paint on them too. So they're just basic open hands that let you do a lot of different poses. These are the ones that can also flex inwards, so again, very tight, but there is a joint there that you can flex it around, so that's cool. I'm going to leave the hands in that she has right now, though, just because that ties into some of the other accessories that she has. But before we get to that, I do want to point out she has her hat, which you can see on the packaging as well. And, well, that's kind of awkward looking, isn't it? Let's see. I mean, I don't think there's any way to get it to fit on there any better. It's just very small, and that's kind of the thing. All right, well, I don't know quite how, I don't think that's like super accurate to the show. I mean, maybe we could work it down a little bit more, but it feels like that's kind of it. So there's her hat, at least she has it. But most importantly, Nemesis has her signature weapon, which is right here. This is her flaming swords. There is a version without flaming action. That's what these are right here. But more impressive, we have them in full flaming mode right here. And this is really nice. I really like the way that they painted these. You can kind of really feel a sense of heat coming out of them. It's very cool. Let's go ahead and see if we can get these into her hands and see how that's going to look. And that's a big question here, is can I get this into her hands without breaking them? Because again, this is straight out of the box. And even this is kind of stiff. And this is the kind of thing where you probably would want to heat them. I'm just going to try this right now to see if we can do this. So far, it's not going great, and I'm actually forcing it pretty hard right now. I'm just afraid to like break it because it is quite tenuous, but there we go. Okay, with a little bit of wiggling, you can get it to go down. And honestly, like if you do it once, usually you're good. You don't have to really worry about doing it again. But here we go. So this is what I was saying too. The nice thing about having those double jointed elbows is you get some really cool posing with that, and you guys can see that here. So that's her flaming swords. Really, really pretty accessory. Very nice. And you can put those away as well. She has these little scabbards right here. So just to show you guys how one of them works, I'm just going to take this one, and it looks like we just slide it straight back into there. And you can do it on the other side as well if you want to. And just for the sake of being completionists, well, why don't we go ahead and do that too? I made completionist 2 words. That's how complete that was. So there we go. We got one pair in there, other pair in her hands, but overall these things look very cool. Really nice accessories. Final thoughts on Nemesis and Jimmy are, if you're a Rebel Moon fan, these are without a doubt must-haves. But even if you're not, they're very exciting figures that could fit in with your Star Wars Black Series figures and other sci-fi characters, but do remember that they're both going to be a bit taller than 1/12 scale figures. And speaking of, here's a quick comparison with these guys. And as you can see, Nemesis is taller than Marvel Legends Rogue and G.I. Joe Classified Zarana. Not too much, but it's still noticeable. And likewise, Jimmy is even larger, looming over Gambit and a WWE Legends Mr. Perfect figure. I know, very weird choices to put in there, but that's just what I had at my disposal at the moment. So yeah, they're on the bigger size because of their scale, but I think they'll fit in fine with the other Diamond figures or McFarlane Toys figures, so just keep this in mind when adding them to your collection. But other than the size, they're excellent figures that will hopefully have many more friends and foes joining them soon. And looking ahead, the pre-orders are already up for Wave 2 of this series, which includes Admiral Atticus Noble and Titus. And speaking of, if you want to pick up these figures for yourself, check out our affiliate links in the description below. If you pick up these figures or anything else using these links, it helps support this YouTube channel at no extra cost to you. So that's our look at Series 1 of Diamond Select's Rebel Moon 1/10 scale action figures, kicking things off with Jimmy and Nemesis. Let me know what you think about these guys in the comments below. And in the meantime, I'm Matthew. This has been Nerd News Today. Thanks for watching, and we will see you next time.